The Galactic Council had always been a distant presence in human lives. For centuries, humans had watched as alien species made laws, controlled trade, and decided who could explore the stars. Many thought humanity was too small, too unpredictable, and too emotional to matter in galactic politics. But humans had a quiet determination. They always reached higher, explored further, and learned faster. Then one day, everything changed. The Council, after a long series of secretive meetings, called for a vote. It was not an ordinary vote. It was a decision that would affect every human on Earth. The Council had decided that humanity was too dangerous, too unpredictable, and too independent. They voted to exile Earth from the galactic network. Trade routes would be closed, ambassadors would be recalled, and humans would no longer have any voice in interstellar affairs. No one expected such a harsh decision. On the surface, humans looked fragile. Their ships were small, their fleets limited, and their technology, compared to some alien civilizations, seemed primitive. But the Council overlooked something that had always defined humans: their resilience. News of the vote spread quickly across Earth. At first, people could not believe it. The media exploded with stories, debates, and fear. Governments called emergency meetings. Scientists, engineers, and explorers stared at screens, trying to understand what it meant. The phrase exile hung heavy in the air. It sounded final, almost cruel. But humans had always faced impossible odds before, and somehow they would find a way. Even as the Council celebrated their decision, Earth prepared. Ambassadors packed their belongings and boarded ships heading back home. Starports were filled with people saying quiet goodbyes to friends and family. It was not a celebration, nor was it panic. It was the calm determination of a species forced to stand alone. Then humanity sent their final transmission. It was simple, calm, and precise. They stated they would comply with the exile, but they also made it clear that this would not break them. It was not a threat. There were no aggressive words. Yet the tone carried something the Council could not ignore: a warning wrapped in patience. For the first time, other species noticed that humans did not panic, did not collapse, and did not beg for mercy. They watched quietly as Earth's fleets and explorers pulled away from the network of civilizations that had ignored them for so long. Humans did not vanish in anger or fear. They vanished in silence. With quiet confidence beyond the known regions of space, humans found freedom. No one followed them. No one interfered. At first, there was uncertainty. Systems outside galactic charts were dark, untested, and dangerous. But humans were explorers by nature. They mapped new stars, examined ancient ruins, and discovered resources that other species had long abandoned or overlooked. Every obstacle became a chance to grow stronger. On Earth, people worked tirelessly. Engineers designed ships capable of long journeys, capable of surviving in places no one had ventured. Scientists experimented with old technology left behind in abandoned systems, turning relics into new tools for exploration. Colonists trained. In the harshest conditions, learned to live anywhere, from frozen worlds to desert moons. Every human, whether on a ship, on a colony, or at home on Earth, felt part of something larger, the quiet promise that their exile would not be their end. The Council, meanwhile, continued their daily politics without realizing what they had done. They believed they had removed a threat, a species too reckless and too powerful in their ambition. Yet humans were not reckless. They were patient, disciplined, and adaptable. Every step away from the Council's influence was a step toward building something the galaxy had never seen. Back on Earth, people shared stories of determination. Families worked together to send supplies to explorers. Cities built new learning centers for scientists and engineers. Teachers spoke to children about the galaxy beyond their skies, inspiring. A generation that would grow up knowing they were part of something extraordinary. Every human understood one simple truth. Exile did not mean the end. It meant freedom, opportunity, and the chance to create their own destiny. Even as humans settled into the unknown, there was a sense of quiet rebellion. They did not wage war, they did not scream, and they did not retaliate. Instead, they proved that survival and growth could be a weapon as strong as any fleet or army. The galaxy may have seen them as fragile, but humans were quietly preparing for a future where no one would underestimate them again, not by the time decades. Past humanity's exile had become a story of resilience. Ships that once seemed small and fragile now explored far beyond the charted territories. Colonies thrived in harsh conditions. Engineers discovered new forms of energy and propulsion that made their old fleets look slow and clumsy. Every human on every world carried a single belief. They were no longer just survivors. They were the architects of their own destiny. And yet, through all of this, humans never lost their humanity. They laughed, they celebrated small victories, and they held on to hope. They built communities, helped each other through hardship, and preserved the arts, music, and stories that defined them. Exile had forced them to be stronger, but it had not changed who they were. In the council's halls, whispers began to rise. Some ambassadors wondered if they had underestimated humanity. Some scientists noted that the species they thought fragile was quietly growing stronger, more innovative, and more united. But no one could predict how far humans would go. Exile was supposed to weaken them, but instead, it had unleashed their potential. Humans did not return to the galaxy with anger or vengeance. They returned with purpose. And in that purpose lay a quiet, unstoppable force that the Council had ignored. The story of humanity's exile was just beginning, and no one outside Earth truly understood what it would lead to. Humanity had left the known galaxy behind, but leaving did not mean slowing down. In fact, it was only the beginning. The first few years were not easy. Starships traveled into empty space, far from the familiar constellations and mapped systems. Supplies were limited, communications with Earth were stretched across light years, and unknown dangers lurked in the darkness. Yet, humans had something the Council could never understand: a stubborn determination to survive and thrive no matter the cost. The early explorers were cautious but curious. Every uncharted system was studied with patience. They discovered planets that were once thought uninhabitable, moons with hidden water beneath frozen surfaces, and asteroids containing rare metals that could fuel entire colonies. Engineers and scientists worked together to understand these discoveries. Every breakthrough became a small victory, a reason to push forward even when the unknown seemed intimidating. On these journeys, humans learned to adapt faster than any other species could. They built ships that could repair themselves in space, and life support systems that could survive harsh environments. Colonists trained to grow food in zero-gravity conditions, creating small but sustainable communities on barren moons and rocky planets. Every challenge was met with a combination of ingenuity, teamwork, and sheer human stubbornness. It was not a race to compete with the galaxy. It was a quiet, deliberate march toward independence. While humans explored, communities back on Earth worked tirelessly to support the fleet. Cities became innovation hubs. Scientists developed new energy sources. Engineers designed more efficient spacecraft. And teachers inspired young minds with visions of a galaxy that belonged to those brave enough to explore it. Children grew up hearing stories not of fear or weakness, but of resilience, courage, and the belief that humans could rise anywhere, even in the most hostile corners of space. Even during this period of isolation, humans maintained their spirit. Music, art, and literature flourished on ships and colonies alike. People celebrated milestones, not with grandeur, but with quiet joy, launching a new colony, successfully growing a harvest on a barren moon, or discovering a new system rich with resources. These moments reminded everyone that humanity was not just surviving, they were building a culture, a civilization that was uniquely their own. Communication between colonies and the fleet was slow, but it strengthened the sense of unity. Messages carried across light years were read and cherished. Families spoke to each other in letters that might take months to arrive, and communities shared knowledge, advice, and discoveries as if they were pieces of a larger puzzle. Despite the distance, humans felt closer than ever. Exile had forced them apart physically, but it had brought their spirit together in ways no council decision could ever break. As decades passed, the first signs of something greater began to emerge. Humans had begun to create advanced technologies by studying ancient structures and abandoned stations in remote systems. They had learned to harness energy sources previously thought impossible, manipulate gravity for faster-than-light travel, and build ships that could endure the harshest conditions in the galaxy. While other species relied on old traditions, humans were inventing the future with every passing year. Colonies grew into small cities, then cities grew into thriving planets. Humans learned to terraform certain worlds, turning barren landscapes into habitable environments. Water was purified, air was regulated, and energy was harvested in ways that made life sustainable even on distant planets. Every colony was a testament to human resilience and creativity. While the galaxy had thought them fragile, humans were quietly building a network that could rival any interstellar civilization. The fleet, too, had changed. What began as a few exploratory ships evolved into a well-organized force, capable of both defense and large-scale construction. Humans trained their people not for conquest, but for survival and efficiency. Every individual was valued for their skills, and teamwork became the foundation of society. Discipline did not mean rigidity. It meant ensuring that no human was left behind, no opportunity wasted, and no challenge unmet. Yet, humans never lost their curiosity. Even as colonies prospered and fleets grew stronger, they continued exploring. Unknown systems were scanned, planets were mapped, and long-lost technologies were studied. Every discovery was shared with the wider human network, creating a civilization that was both decentralized and united. This balance of independence and cooperation became the true strength of humanity. Despite being far from the galaxy, whispers of human progress began to reach others. Alien traders, who occasionally passed through the edge of human-controlled space, reported seeing new colonies, massive spacecraft, and technologies that seemed almost magical compared to what the Council considered standard. Some were amazed, others fearful. They spoke of humans not as weak exiles, but as a species that had transformed exile into opportunity, fear into strength, and isolation into a hidden empire, even in the quietest moments. Humans remembered why they had left the known galaxy. Exile had been meant to limit them, to keep them from growing too fast, too strong. But every challenge had become a stepping stone. Every obstacle, a lesson. Every discovery, a tool for the future. Humans had turned punishment into possibility, and isolation into the greatest classroom any species could ever imagine. Life on the new colonies was not without struggle. Weather conditions could be extreme, crops sometimes failed, and accidents happened in the vast machinery humans relied on. But these struggles only strengthened their resolve. Communities learned to work together, combining the wisdom of the old world with the ingenuity of the new. Mistakes were studied, not punished. Failures were stepping stones, not endings. The human approach to survival had changed the very definition of resilience in the galaxy. By the end of the first century of exile, humans had achieved what the Council never thought possible. They had created not just surviving colonies, but thriving worlds connected by knowledge, trade, and shared purpose. Every human, from the youngest child growing plants in zero-gravity farms to the engineers building massive ships in orbit, understood one simple truth: exile was not the end. It was the beginning of something far greater God, and yet humans did not seek revenge. They did not wage war against the Council or any other species. Instead, they focused on building, learning, and exploring. This restraint only added to the awe of other civilizations, who slowly realized that humanity's power was not just in technology or numbers, it was in their spirit. They were a species that could endure anything, and they were doing it with patience, intelligence, and unwavering determination, not in quiet moments. Humans would look at the stars and imagine what awaited them beyond the known regions of the galaxy. They dreamed of vast civilizations, of ancient knowledge, and of places untouched by any being. Exile had given them freedom, but more importantly, it had given them time, the rarest resource in the galaxy, to prepare, to grow, and to become something that no one could predict or control. The Council, still watching from afar, could not understand what was happening. They assumed humanity would struggle, that isolation would slow their progress. But humans were not slowed by fear or limitation. They were accelerated by purpose. Exile had forced them to rely on each other, to innovate constantly, and to dream without boundaries. And as each decade passed, it became clearer. Humans were not merely surviving. They were building the foundation of a civilization that would one day astonish the galaxy. As humans moved deeper into uncharted space, their perspective began to change. Exile had forced them into the unknown, but the unknown became a place of opportunity rather than fear. The emptiness around them was no longer just a void. It was a canvas. Every planet, asteroid, and star system held potential, waiting for human ingenuity to shape it. And humans were ready to shape it. The first colonies in these distant regions were small, often consisting of just a few thousand people, but their impact was enormous. On rocky planets with thin atmospheres, humans built dome-shaped habitats that could withstand extreme weather. On icy moons, they drilled beneath frozen surfaces to find liquid water, creating underground lakes to sustain life. Every challenge, no matter how harsh, became a lesson in adaptability and survival. Humans learned quickly that the galaxy did not care if they failed, so they had to care enough for both themselves and each other. Life on these colonies was difficult, but humans found ways to make it meaningful. Schools were established in small domes where children could learn about science, history, and the universe beyond their new homes. Adults worked long hours building structures, maintaining energy systems, and improving life support machinery, but they also shared stories, songs, and games to keep morale high. Even in isolation, humans understood that survival was not only about food and shelter, it was about preserving culture, hope, and community. Every human, from engineers to farmers, understood their role in building something bigger. Engineers designed machines that could repair themselves automatically. Farmers experimented with growing crops in artificial soil mixtures and low-gravity greenhouses. Medics developed treatments for conditions caused by new planetary environments. Humans began to realize that no matter how far from Earth they were, they could recreate a civilization that was stronger, more resilient, and more adaptable than ever before. Exploration was a daily part of life. Ships scanned nearby star systems for resources, mapping safe passages and studying planets that might one day support human life. When unknown signals appeared, humans investigated cautiously, but curiosity always won. Ancient ruins of alien civilizations were studied, sometimes for knowledge, other times for inspiration. Every discovery was carefully recorded and shared across colonies, creating a network of intelligence that tied together scattered communities. Despite their successes, humans never grew complacent. Every failure became a lesson. A failed colony might teach them better ways to manage water, energy, or food. A ship accident might reveal a flaw in design or navigation. Humans embraced mistakes as part of growth, understanding that perfection was less valuable than progress. Over time, this mindset became a defining characteristic of their civilization. While other species often punished failure, humans used it to innovate, improve, and prepare for the future. In this period, humans also began to master new technologies. They discovered ways to extract energy from stellar winds, built engines capable of traveling faster and farther, and designed systems that could protect entire colonies from environmental hazards. Ships grew larger and more advanced, capable of carrying hundreds of people across light years. Humans were no longer just surviving, they were thriving. Even in the most inhospitable regions of space, social structures on new colonies developed naturally. Leaders were chosen for their ability to solve problems and inspire people, not for power or status. Communities functioned as teams rather than hierarchies, with responsibilities shared to ensure every individual contributed and every voice mattered. Humans learned that cooperation was essential in the unknown. If one person failed, it could affect the entire colony, so teamwork became ingrained in their culture. As decades passed, the first hints of interstellar power began to emerge. Humans were no longer just isolated colonies, they were an interconnected civilization, capable of quick communication and resource sharing. Supply ships traveled between systems, delivering food, equipment, and information. Scientists collaborated on projects across planets, sharing ideas in real time through advanced networks. What had begun as a scattered exile slowly transformed into a unified effort to build a civilization that could stand independently of the galaxy. Even with this growth, humans did not forget their past. Stories of the Council's decision to exile them were passed down from generation to generation. Yet these stories were not told with anger or hatred. They were lessons in resilience. Humans understood that exile had forced them to discover their potential. The galaxy had expected them to fail, but humans had turned expectation into opportunity. Every child grew up knowing that humans were not fragile, and every adult understood that every challenge was a chance to prove that truth. As humans expanded further, the galaxy began to take notice, even if slowly. Wandering alien traders occasionally glimpsed human colonies on the edges of charted space. They saw massive greenhouses on barren worlds, sprawling cities under protective domes, and ships capable of long, self-sustained journeys. Rumors spread that humans were more than survivors. They were innovators, explorers, and pioneers. Some aliens admired their resilience, while others feared what a united humanity could become. On one planet, a human colony faced an unexpected challenge when a massive storm system threatened to destroy their habitat domes. Engineers worked around the clock, repairing structural weaknesses, reinforcing shields, and rerouting energy systems. Farmers protected their crops using newly developed growth modules, while medics ensured that the sick and injured were safe. The colony survived, not because they had superior technology, but because they worked together. This combination of innovation, teamwork, and determination became a signature of humanity's approach to survival. Humans also learned to thrive in isolation. Long periods without contact with other colonies taught them patience, discipline, and resourcefulness. Children were educated to think critically and solve problems independently. Adults trained in multiple skills to ensure that every individual could contribute in emergencies. Humans had no choice but to be adaptable, and over time, adaptability became one of their greatest strengths. Over the years, humans transformed raw, uninhabitable planets into thriving ecosystems. They planted forests, created lakes, and established cities that blended with the natural environment. Colonists discovered ways to recycle resources efficiently, manage waste, and produce energy sustainably. Every achievement reinforced the belief that exile was not a punishment, but a catalyst for growth and innovation. In the fleet, humans refined their ships for exploration and defense. While they had no enemies yet, every crew member trained as if they might encounter danger at any moment. Engineers improved propulsion systems, medics studied alien biology, and scientists developed tools to study unknown planets quickly. Humans understood that survival required preparation, intelligence, and vigilance. Every ship, no matter its size, became a mobile hub of learning, innovation, and community. As time passed, a new culture emerged among humans. It was a culture of resilience, curiosity, and collaboration. People celebrated discovery as much as survival. They held festivals on distant moons to mark successful terraforming projects. They composed music inspired by alien skies and the silence of deep space. They told stories about overcoming the odds and turning challenges into triumphs. This culture became a thread that tied humans together across light years, connecting scattered colonies with shared identity and purpose. By the end of this era, humans had accomplished something remarkable. From exile and uncertainty, they had built a civilization that was self-sustaining, innovative, and connected. They had turned isolation into opportunity, fear into courage, and punishment into progress. Humanity was no longer fragile. They were explorers, inventors, and builders, quietly preparing for a future the Council could never have imagined. And yet, humans did not rush toward conflict or revenge. They did not seek power for its own sake. Instead, they focused on learning, exploring, and growing. Every new colony, every innovation, and every discovery was a step toward a future in which humans would stand independently in the galaxy, not as victims of exile, but as architects of their destiny. The story of humanity's exile had evolved. What had begun as a punishment became a journey of transformation, resilience, and hope. Humans had not only survived, they had thrived. And as the galaxy slowly began to notice, one thing became clear: humans were no longer to be underestimated. As the years passed, humanity's presence in the distant reaches of space began to take shape in ways no one had anticipated. What had started as a desperate struggle for survival had grown into something far greater. Humans were no longer merely existing. They were building, exploring, and preparing to become a force that could not be ignored. Every planet colonized, every ship launched, and every discovery made added to a quiet, steady momentum that would one day astonish the galaxy. The new colonies were marvels of human ingenuity. On planets with thin, toxic atmospheres, people built layered cities beneath protective domes where air was clean, energy flowed freely, and crops grew under artificial sunlight. Engineers designed water recycling systems that ensured no drop was wasted, while medics developed ways to prevent illness in harsh conditions. Every human understood that their survival depended on collaboration, creativity, and constant problem-solving. They were learning to thrive in environments where other species might have given up entirely. Humans also began to unify their scattered colonies into a network. Long-distance communications using advanced signal relays allowed messages to travel across light years in days rather than months. Knowledge was shared freely. Discoveries in one system became lessons for others. Colonists learned faster because they did not rely on trial and error alone. They could benefit from the experiences of others across the human network. Slowly, an invisible thread connected humans across the galaxy, binding them together without formal governments or rigid hierarchies. In space, humans became masters of adaptation. Ships were no longer simple vessels. They were mobile cities, laboratories, and training grounds all in one. Crew members were skilled in multiple disciplines: navigation, engineering, medicine, communication, and defense. Everyone had a role, and every role was essential. Humans understood that the survival of a ship, a colony, or an expedition depended on every individual performing their best. Mistakes could be fatal, but they also became opportunities to improve. Learning from failure became a culture, and adaptability became a defining strength of humanity. As technology advanced, humans began exploring systems that had been abandoned for centuries. They found ancient alien stations, half-buried planets, and remnants of civilizations long forgotten. Some were dangerous, filled with unstable energy or traps left behind by extinct species. Others held knowledge or technology that humans could adapt to their own needs. Engineers studied ancient propulsion systems. Scientists analyzed unknown elements, and every discovery was tested carefully. Over time, humans began to combine these relics with their own inventions, creating machines and ships that were beyond the comprehension of most other civilizations. At the same time, humans refined the structures of their society. Communities were built on cooperation rather than authority. Leaders emerged naturally, chosen for their wisdom and problem-solving skills rather than their power or status. Schools, research centers, and training facilities ensured that every human could contribute. Children learned science, history, and survival skills, while adults mastered multiple professions to support the broader civilization. Humans understood that their greatest strength was not technology alone. It was the people behind it. Colonies continued to grow. On desert planets, humans created irrigation systems and artificial lakes, turning barren lands into thriving settlements. On frozen moons, domed cities glimmered under artificial sunlight, powered by energy harvested from nearby stars. Even in isolation, humans found ways to live comfortably, sustainably, and creatively. Their environment shaped them, but it did not limit them. Every challenge became a lesson in resilience and innovation. In parallel, humans began organizing their fleets with a focus on both exploration and defense. Ships were built in modular designs, allowing quick repairs and upgrades. Crews trained not for war, but for survival, efficiency, and problem-solving in unpredictable situations. Humans understood that strength was not just measured by weapons. It was measured by coordination, intelligence, and the ability to adapt. This mindset made their fleets highly effective, capable of performing missions that would challenge even the most experienced alien civilizations. Humanity also learned to manage resources on a scale that few species could imagine. Planets were carefully balanced for energy production, agriculture, and habitation. Rare materials were mined efficiently and transported to where they were most needed. Waste was recycled, energy was stored, and technology was designed to last for generations. The scale of planning and foresight amazed those who glimpsed human colonies from afar, even though few realized just how extensive the human network had become. Despite their growing power, humans did not act aggressively. They had been exiled, but they did not seek revenge. Instead, they focused on building, learning, and preparing for the future. They understood that the galaxy might one day notice them, and when it did, humanity would not be reckless. They would be patient, deliberate, and ready. Their strength was measured not by battles fought, but by the invisible empire they were quietly constructing across light years of space. Even in the darkest corners of space, humans preserved culture and humanity. Music, literature, and art thrived on colonies and ships alike. People celebrated milestones in simple ways. A new ship launched, a harvest completed, or a colony surviving a harsh winter. Every celebration reinforced the sense that humanity was not just surviving, they were creating a civilization with meaning, purpose, and identity. These cultural achievements were just as important as technological advancements because they reminded humans why they endured and what they were building together. Over time, the galaxy began to hear whispers of human progress. Alien travelers who passed near human space reported colonies that were self-sufficient, fleets that moved with precision, and technologies that were far beyond what many civilizations considered possible. Some were amazed, others uneasy. Few could have predicted that the species they had exiled would become so organized, so capable, and so relentless in their quiet growth. Humans were no longer fragile. They were a civilization, quietly preparing to show the galaxy what exile could not stop on one distant world. A human colony faced a sudden environmental disaster when a previously stable planet experienced violent seismic activity. Buildings shook, energy systems faltered, and life support systems were at risk. Yet humans responded with calm efficiency. Engineers rerouted power, medics treated injuries, and teams worked together to stabilize the colony. By the end of the crisis, the colony was not only safe but stronger. Every problem faced and overcome strengthened humanity's confidence in their ability to survive anything in these decades. Humans also became masters of long-term planning. Colonies were designed to grow sustainably. Fleets were organized to explore systematically, and knowledge was cataloged meticulously. Humans understood that their survival required foresight as much as courage. Every decision, from crop planting to ship design, was made with the future in mind. This careful, deliberate approach set them apart from other civilizations, which often relied on tradition or rigid hierarchies rather than innovation and adaptability. Despite these advancements, humans remained humble. They celebrated progress, but never assumed it was permanent. They trained constantly, experimented cautiously, and shared knowledge freely. Even as they built powerful fleets, vast colonies, and advanced technologies, they did so without arrogance or aggression. Exile had taught them patience, and humanity understood that patience was often more valuable than power by the end of this period. Humans had quietly transformed exile into opportunity. They had created a civilization that was self-sufficient, innovative, and united. Every colony, every ship, and every discovery was part of a growing network of strength and knowledge. They had not sought to conquer the galaxy, but they had built the capacity to stand independently. The galaxy might have ignored them before, but humans were ready for the day it could no longer do so. And yet, through all of this growth, humans never forgot why they had been exiled. The memory of the Council's decision was a silent motivator. Humans knew that the galaxy had underestimated them, dismissed them, and tried to contain them. But rather than reacting with anger or violence, humans had responded with action, patience, and determination. Exile had not broken them. It had taught them what it meant to be resilient, resourceful, and unstoppable in quiet moments. Humans on distant colonies would look at the stars and wonder what awaited them beyond the horizon. They knew the galaxy was vast and unpredictable, but they also knew they had prepared for anything it might throw their way. Every innovation, every colony, and every ship was a step toward a future where humans would stand proud, not as exiles, but as a civilization that had turned punishment into possibility, isolation into opportunity, and survival into mastery. Humans were ready. The galaxy, whether it realized it or not, would soon see the result of centuries of patient growth, quiet innovation, and relentless determination. And when that day came, no one would doubt the power, creativity, and resilience of the species the Council had once tried to exile. After centuries of quiet growth, humans had become a civilization unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Their colonies thrived on distant worlds. Their fleets had grown in size and sophistication, and their knowledge of the stars had expanded far beyond anything imaginable in their early years of exile. They were self-sufficient, resourceful, and ready. Yet, until now, their presence had been largely unnoticed by the broader galactic community. That changed when the first alien survey vessel stumbled across the edge of human-controlled space. The ship was not seeking humans. It was on a routine mapping mission, scanning star systems for resources and anomalies. What it found instead was a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had expected. Sleek ships, massive yet efficient, patrolled the borders of human territory. They moved with precision, coordination, and silent authority. The survey crew was stunned. They had not anticipated that humans could have developed such advanced technology without the guidance of the Council, or other species. The humans did not attack. They observed, communicated, and maintained control of their space with quiet confidence. When the alien ship transmitted a message asking for identification, the response was measured and calm. Humans introduced themselves simply, providing clear information about their location and systems. But they made one thing unmistakably clear. This was their space, and they had the right to defend it. The aliens left without incident, but the story of what they had seen traveled fast across neighboring systems. The first contact was only the beginning. Word spread quickly that humans were no longer the fragile, underestimated species the Council had dismissed. Traders, explorers, and diplomats spoke of thriving colonies on harsh planets, fleets capable of long-term operations far from home, and technologies that surpassed what many civilizations considered possible. Curiosity mixed with caution. Some species were impressed, others wary. Everyone began to wonder, what had humanity become during their long exile? Humans, however, approached this new attention with patience. They were no longer desperate or isolated. They had built a civilization capable of self-defense, exploration, and innovation. They did not rush to make alliances, declare wars, or seek revenge. Instead, they observed, learned, and prepared. They understood that the galaxy was vast, full of unknown possibilities, and that patience often yielded greater power than aggression. On one particular exploration mission, humans discovered a system that contained remnants of an ancient civilization. Ships and structures floated silently in space, abandoned for millennia. Humans carefully studied the ruins, scanning every surface, analyzing every artifact, and documenting every finding. Their goal was not conquest, but understanding. They learned from the technology, adapted what they could, and left behind nothing that could cause harm. These discoveries accelerated human innovation, providing insights that allowed them to improve propulsion systems, energy production, and life support mechanisms for colonies in even the harshest conditions. Back on colonies near the edges of human space, communities continued to grow. Cities expanded under domes, agricultural systems became more efficient, and energy grids powered entire planets sustainably. Education became a central focus. Children learned about survival, science, history, and the wider universe. Adults trained continuously, ensuring that every person could contribute to exploration, innovation, and defense. Humans understood that their greatest strength was their people, and every decision reinforced that idea. Even as they expanded, humans never lost the sense of wonder that had defined their early years. Exploration remained central to their culture. Fleet missions would often take ships to uncharted systems, searching for resources, studying unknown planets, and mapping star systems. Every discovery was shared across human networks, ensuring that no colony or crew operated in isolation. Knowledge became a unifying force, binding the scattered human civilization together and reinforcing their identity as a species that thrived against impossible odds. For many alien civilizations, this new phase of human development was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. Reports described humans as patient, clever, and highly organized. Their technology was advanced, yet practical. Their fleets were powerful, yet disciplined. Their colonies were sustainable, yet innovative. The galaxy began to realize that humanity's exile had not weakened them. It had strengthened them, allowing them to build a civilization free from the interference, politics, and limitations imposed by the Council. In one notable encounter, a wandering alien fleet approached a human colony, expecting either hostility or retreat. What they found instead was calm efficiency. Humans maintained order, communicated clearly, and demonstrated a capacity for both defense and diplomacy. The aliens left the system without conflict, but the impression they carried was lasting. Humans were not fragile, reckless, or weak. They were strong, deliberate, and fully capable of managing their own destiny. This first contact also taught humans an important lesson. Perception mattered. They realized that the galaxy's assumptions about them, fragile, disorganized, weak, had been false from the start. By remaining patient and building their civilization quietly, humans had created a situation where the galaxy would have to respect them, whether they wanted to or not. It was a subtle form of power, but perhaps the most effective one, the ability to be underestimated until it was too late. As humans continued their exploration, they began to establish protocols for contact with other species. They would assess intentions carefully, communicate clearly, and maintain the integrity of their colonies and fleets. They were not seeking conflict, but they were fully prepared for it if necessary. Every fleet officer, every colony administrator, and every citizen understood that humans had earned their independence through resilience, innovation, and determination. The galaxy could not simply dismiss them any longer. Meanwhile, humans did not forget their history. Stories of the Council's decision to exile them were shared widely, not with anger, but as a reminder of what they had overcome. Children grew up learning that humans had been underestimated, dismissed, and forced into isolation. But they also learned that humans had survived, grown, and thrived because of these challenges. Exile had taught patience, adaptability, and strategic thinking skills that now defined human civilization. Human fleets continued to expand strategically, patrolling borders, exploring new systems, and transporting resources between colonies. Ships were equipped with advanced sensors, self-repair capabilities, and modular designs that allowed quick adaptation to unexpected conditions. Crew members trained rigorously, learning multiple skills to ensure the fleet could operate effectively, even in emergencies. Humans understood that preparation, intelligence, and adaptability were more powerful than sheer aggression. In the colonies, social structures matured alongside technology. Communities were organized around cooperation and problem-solving. Leaders were chosen for their skill and vision rather than authority or inheritance. Education focused on critical thinking, practical skills, and creativity. Humans had learned that survival in the galaxy required more than strength. It required knowledge, teamwork, and the ability to adapt to any situation. As humans prepared for further exploration and contact, they also invested in culture. Music, art, and literature flourished on distant worlds. Festivals celebrated scientific achievements, colony milestones, and moments of survival. People shared stories of early struggles, inspiring a sense of pride and identity across generations. Culture became a unifying force, connecting humans across light years and reminding them why they endured and what they were building together. By the end of this phase, humans had established a civilization that was both strong and cohesive. They had fleets capable of defending vast territories, colonies that thrived on harsh worlds, and a network of knowledge connecting every part of their civilization. The galaxy had begun to notice, and humans knew it. They had grown quietly, deliberately, and without interference. They were no longer the species the Council had dismissed. They were ready to be seen, respected, and acknowledged, and yet humans remained patient. They did not rush to assert dominance or claim territory outside their established networks. They understood that the galaxy was vast, full of unknown civilizations, and that patience often yielded greater power than haste. Humans had learned that the greatest strength was not violence or fear, but resilience, intelligence, and the ability to adapt. Exile had taught them that lesson well, and they were prepared to act only when the time was right. Through all of this, humans preserved their spirit. They continued to explore, to innovate, and to celebrate. They continued to teach their children about resilience, creativity, and cooperation. And above all, they continued to grow in strength, knowledge, and confidence. The galaxy might have expected them to fail, but humans had quietly rewritten their own destiny. They were no longer fragile. They were no longer underestimated. They were becoming a civilization the galaxy could not ignore. For centuries, humans had lived in exile, building, exploring, and surviving in the most remote parts of the galaxy. What the Council had expected to be a punishment had become the greatest opportunity humanity had ever been given. Humans were no longer fragile or underestimated. They were a civilization that had grown strong, disciplined, and wise. Their fleets were powerful. Their colonies thrived on planets once thought uninhabitable, and their knowledge of the stars was unmatched. Yet through it all, humans had remained patient. They had not rushed to assert dominance, nor had they sought revenge. They had waited for the right moment to make themselves truly known. The first signs of that moment arrived unexpectedly. A fleet from the Council, conducting routine inspections in nearby sectors, accidentally drifted into human-controlled space. Initially, the Council representatives assumed that they would find scattered, struggling colonies with limited technology. They did not anticipate the scale, organization, and sophistication of humanity's networks. As the fleet approached, they were met by an array of ships larger, faster, and more advanced than anything they had imagined. Every vessel moved in perfect coordination, responding instantly to changes in the formation. It was a display of precision, discipline, and quiet power that stunned the alien observers. Communication was established carefully. Humans did not attack. They did not make threats. Their message was clear, calm, and deliberate. This was their space, built through centuries of work, sacrifice, and determination. They were not seeking war, but they would defend their civilization if necessary. The tone carried authority without aggression, a reminder that humans had earned every inch of their territory and every achievement in their network. For the first time, the Council fully realized what they had underestimated. The species they had dismissed as fragile, reckless, and incapable of independence had transformed into something far greater than they had imagined. Humans were no longer a minor presence. They were a civilization capable of defending themselves, thriving in isolation, and innovating in ways the Council could not have predicted. The realization struck a mixture of awe, fear, and regret among the representatives. Meanwhile, humans were not idle. Colonies continued to grow and thrive, drawing on centuries of preparation and careful planning. Cities on distant worlds expanded under protective domes, with systems that recycled air, water, and energy efficiently. Agriculture thrived in artificial and natural environments alike. Education was universal, ensuring that every child could contribute to the growth and development of human civilization. Every human was taught resilience, cooperation, and creativity as core values. This culture, deeply embedded across thousands of colonies, was as important as the technology humans had developed. Fleet operations became even more refined. Humans had learned to coordinate across vast distances, using advanced communication networks to relay information quickly between colonies and ships. They trained in multiple disciplines, ensuring that every crew member could adapt to any situation. Their fleets were capable of both exploration and defense, moving with silent efficiency that astonished alien observers. While humans had never sought conquest, their ability to control and protect their territory was undeniable. The impact on the Council was profound. Diplomats and scientists alike began to study human colonies from afar, trying to understand how a species they had exiled could have achieved so much in isolation. Reports highlighted not only technological advancements, but also social structures, education, and cultural cohesion. Humans had demonstrated that true strength lay not only in ships or weapons, but in the spirit of the people themselves. Their resilience, innovation, and patience had turned exile into a secret advantage that the galaxy had failed to anticipate. Despite the attention from the Council and neighboring civilizations, humans maintained their principles. They had not forgotten the lessons of exile. Patience, strategic thinking, and collaboration were their greatest strengths. They had built an empire quietly, without arrogance, aggression, or unnecessary interference. Their actions showed that power did not require domination. It could be demonstrated through preparedness, innovation, and the ability to thrive in adversity. On many colonies, humans reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Older generations shared stories of early struggles, long voyages through empty space, harsh planetary conditions, and the uncertainty of survival. They spoke of small victories, the first successful crop on a barren moon, the launch of a self-sustaining ship, or the establishment of the first long-distance communication network. These stories were not tales of hardship alone, but lessons in patience, courage, and creativity. Young humans grew up understanding that the challenges of the past had forged the foundation of their civilization. Exploration remained central to human culture. Ships ventured beyond previously charted space, mapping new systems and studying unknown worlds. Scientists analyzed alien artifacts, not to exploit them, but to learn from them. Engineers incorporated new discoveries into human designs, improving ships, colonies, and life support systems. Every mission, every expedition, reinforced the understanding that humans were capable of adapting, learning, and growing faster than any species had expected. Even as humans displayed their strength, they did so without arrogance. Trade networks were established cautiously with neighboring civilizations. Cultural exchanges were encouraged, and knowledge was shared selectively to build alliances without overcommitting. Humans understood that balance and diplomacy were as important as technology and fleets. Their goal was not domination, it was recognition, respect, and the ability to exist freely, independently, and securely in the galaxy. That one pivotal moment came when a council envoy visited a human colony to formally re-establish communication. They arrived expecting either hostility or desperate pleas for reconciliation. Instead, they were met with calm efficiency. Colonists and fleet officers demonstrated their capabilities without boasting. They spoke clearly, logically, and respectfully. The message was unmistakable. Humans had grown powerful, not through aggression, but through patience, innovation, and unity. The council representatives left with a mixture of awe and regret. The broader galaxy also began to take note. Traders, explorers, and diplomats reported human colonies that were thriving, fleets that were coordinated and disciplined, and technologies that had been developed independently. Rumors spread about the resourcefulness and ingenuity of humans, and a quiet respect grew across neighboring systems. Humans had taken what was meant to limit them and turned it into a strength, showing that exile had been a catalyst, not a punishment. In colonies across human-controlled space, communities celebrated their achievements quietly but meaningfully. Milestones were honored, new colonies launched successfully, fleets returned from long missions, and technologies were developed that improved daily life. These celebrations reinforced the culture of resilience, cooperation, and curiosity that had been central to humanity's growth. Music, art, and literature flourished, reflecting the experiences of a species that had turned hardship into opportunity. Humans also prepared for the long-term future. Research centers were established to study interstellar travel, resource management, and sustainable colonization. Education programs focused on critical thinking, problem-solving, and creativity. Every individual was trained to contribute, ensuring that no colony or fleet depended solely on a few people. This decentralized strength made human civilization resilient to unexpected challenges. From natural disasters to technological failures, by the end of this period, humans had achieved something remarkable. They had turned exile into independence, isolation into preparation, and uncertainty into opportunity. The Council had once underestimated them. Neighboring civilizations had once dismissed them, but humans had quietly built a civilization that could stand on its own. They were not seeking revenge or conquest. They were seeking recognition for what they had achieved through centuries of perseverance. And then, the final realization became clear. Humanity was no longer just surviving in exile. They had become a civilization that the galaxy could not ignore. Their fleets, colonies, technologies, and culture demonstrated a combination of strength, wisdom, and resilience that few species could match. The Council and others could either accept humans as they were powerful, independent, and prepared, or they could risk facing a civilization that had learned to thrive under pressure and adapt faster than anyone had imagined. Humans had come full circle. From exile, they had built a mighty dominion across the stars. They had grown stronger not through anger or vengeance, but through patience, intelligence, and unity. They had transformed what was meant as punishment into opportunity, showing that the greatest power often comes from resilience and foresight rather than force alone. The galaxy had finally seen the truth. Humans were not fragile, reckless, or weak. They were deliberate, resourceful, and unstoppable when working together. Exile had not ended humanity, it had awakened it. And as humans looked toward the stars, they did so with quiet confidence, ready to continue exploring, building, and thriving in a galaxy that would never underestimate them again.